Are we ready to go, Penny?
Now, if you want to restart it. If you want her to connect to it. Okay. Because what I'm assuming is that the meeting was running just fine through the phone connection. But there. The thing is, this is her account, so that's her default picture on the account. Yeah.
So whenever you want to search, like try to move back up a bit.
I mean, if you open it, it'll just be the same thing on that one.
Okay.
Yeah. In full screen.
Okay, so you want to start?
Yes.
But
when she connects, I'll see what I can do.
I would just start it right now so that whenever she does connect, you can.
So go back and do it again.
Help Zoom open. You don't have to put it on the screen if you want. You can
sign in.
Jason, I need you to play something loud and something classical
right now.
When we get started.
Oh. Okay.
Because I actually called them and they didn't respond. They're visiting.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep, it'll be a button.
Yeah,
But you
it's
can
not a
drag
problem.
You can drag it off if you want. If you don't want it up there, you want to. Then take it and just drag it onto this other screen until you want to put it up. So I can give it to you right now. Scoot this over here. Yeah. Because it's the only reason to have it on that screen is for the people on camera. And for the people on the screen. Oh, that's just, yeah, that's just waiting. Stuff and stuff. Yeah.
Alright, so whenever you want to start, you can hold the on you at the same spot.
Okay.
And then
All
you're
right.
going to play something.
Good. Like
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, play something now. And today's town meeting is brought to you by Schaefer. That's a very nice 1950s feel to it. You can all be seated as we're gathered for this town meeting. Now, you got to keep in mind, I'm from Massachusetts, so when it comes to standing on a soapbox, we ain't got a problem. Okay? Now, I know at least one person in this audience knows that what I'm talking about, because that person is a daughter of the Revolution. So please don't be offended. I am your missions outreach chairman, so I am on the board. And today, this is not going to be as painful as last week was. Anytime you talk about finances, it's going to be painful. We're not going to do that today. So hopefully I'll be entertaining enough. What if? Boy, like you haven't heard that enough today. What if? What if we started talking about changing the conversation? Some of you will remember this. One of our pastors from the past led us through this. And it was an environment of growth. Changing the conversation resulted in a student meal on Wednesdays. Then how about wisdom of stability? Just a little history here. Stability in a congregation in these times. Another growth spurt. So how do I talk to a bunch of you and say, you got to give more? Open up your purses. Dig in your wallets. $9.95 will get you a day with Christ. Evangelism built one of those big walls. You see, it's my mission through my art, as well as, if you can get that Rolodex going, Penny, that would be great. Through my art is to break down those stoic stereotypes that berate us, that build those walls. Evangelism is a gift from God. It's a commission from God. Google. Oh, I didn't just say that, did I? May the copyright police not get me. Okay. Put it in a search engine. There's the copy-free way to say it. Put it in a search engine. Evangelism, God. See what you come up with. You'll come up with all sorts of stuff. Those are what search engines are good for. But it's a gift from God. You know another one? Passion. Passion's a gift from God. As Renee Ruelke said, it's what you do with it that matters. Whether you hurt people or not. Love is a gift from God. We got some dark stuff buried in there too. So is anger. In our scripture today, our closing scripture today, we heard about the devil. But I hope you notice, when you take it home and read it, you'll know all about it. You'll see the obvious thing. Devil loses. In my mission of bringing the message to people, a young man looked at me and he said, I hope you don't mind. I'm wearing a shirt that says I worship Satan. I said, I don't mind you worshiping the losing side. I'm just worried about your soul living afterwards. We're all given these gifts. And it's pretty important. You want to know a mission? There's a mission right there. Our building made available to parishioners and to others to celebrate a day in life. There's a mission right there. That's me and God talking. I ain't painted. Think I'm that good? I'm not that good. Praise band. There's a mission right there. Upper room, please join. Discussion Wednesday, mission. We get so used to hearing the word mission We forget that we're in mission constantly. God brought us here for a reason, to be in mission. Now, this is like a walk up Meals and Wheels. We've been doing that a long time. I don't see any. Now, this is an important point. This is the book that Larry was talking about. We Aren't Broke. If you'd like to peruse it or take a look at the, I don't even know if it has an index. But if you, it's got a bibliography and an index. All you academics, if you're like me, that's the first place I look. Not with this book. I took it right from the face cover. That's an important thing that they talk about. Numbers. Let's define that really, because it's changed. This has led us through that change. We got 10 people at home watching our worship service. So we can't even count numbers like that anymore. Yes, the argument is relevant. The congregational size is shrinking. Yes, that is a reality that we have to deal with. But the doors aren't closed, and we ain't broke. God has us in missions. We've discussed missions. It's a pretty important point to bring missions to you because of the reality of what if? What if Promise of the Palouse came to us and said, we need your help? What if they said we needed volunteers? What if they did this 5 years ago? Actually, it was longer than that, wasn't it? It was about 2010. It's been a long time we've been involved with Promise of the Palouse. What if? What if COVID strikes? We're no longer allowed, literally allowed, to help them? What if a small group of people in a church do the work to write a grant, find out what they need at Promise of the Palouse? It's actually Family Promise of the Palouse. They come up with $18,000. Not your money. And this is another important point of this book. Not your money. You have given very graciously to that organization. You have committed your time. You have helped them survive some really rough times. But the conference came up with the money. We facilitated the process. We facilitated the process successfully. And they were able to house people. Now I've talked about Cindy and I quite a bit. This worship, a lot more than she would probably prefer. And I can tell you something really unique. Cindy and I have lived in 3 communities. And in that time, Cindy and I have watched 3 homes built for people that could not afford housing, that were given the chance to own a home for their family through the Habitat of Humanities. We live a few hundred yards away from a house that Cindy and I worked on. Where's Jesus? Three homes that Simpson United Methodist Church helped build. We're not only called to have missions, we've been doing missions. I'm the guy that gets to bring the good news. What I would like you to all think about when you go home today from this place of worship is how fortunate we are and how blessed we are to be actually able to sit in one group and hear a message. And then think just, what if? You've got all these things. I mean, it's time for you to speak up. You can read this book and get great. The bottom line is that fewer and fewer people are interested in joining an organization that primarily gathers for worship on Sunday mornings. I'm sorry, I'm not criticizing the author. Nothing new. That was a reality we've been dealing with since the 80s. There's nothing new here. We are hungry for innovation because we know we are facing challenges that are complex, problems that are wicked. Yes. And we hear about it more and more because internet is such a wonderful device that connects us. Makes it tough to get out of bed sometimes. Jed Emerson and Antonio Buglevine explained that this bifurcated world is built on two fundamental beliefs: that the only purpose of investing is to make money, and that the only way to solve social and environmental changes is to donate money to charities or wait for governments to act. I studied that in 1984 when I was going to abnormal behavior sociology. Investment of money, what do we do with it? Where do we go with it? What is God asking us to do with it? What is our responsibility in missions? Are we truly the hope? We were the hope to a lot of girls that are wearing dresses that were sewn in this building. Where do we go from there? If housing is the thing, what can $150,000 bring us, Larry, in building homes? If we get with the company out in Chicago that builds hope through homes, $11,000 will buy you a single unit. The incredible thing is that unit will be built not in 30 days, not in 70 days, one day, in a large parking lot, by your community. We have been shown that as facilitators, we can be quite a dynamic force. That might be our future. I don't know God's plan. I believe it's a sin to stand up and say, I know exactly what God wants. Really? You look pretty good for a dead person. In our visitation, in our reflection with God, we're asking people to think different. We're in a program today, and before this program, I focused on production because something has touched in my soul, something that I've experienced through my brother, the Reverend Bruce Arbor, retired, that introduced Cindy and I both to audiovisual. Because on some days, 20% of our audience, and I say a word of audience for the discussion, 20% of our congregation, if you prefer, is at home. Not by any fault of theirs. Not because somebody's slovenly or lazy, they don't want to get dressed. No. Because they're captured in their home for whatever reason. So production matters. See where I'm going with this? So what if we create a blog for Worship Sunday. That comes off of that. What if we do a podcast on Sunday? Have somebody podcast it. What if we go ahead and tap into the University of Idaho's education branch and say, come on over here and go ahead and get your 20 hours of community service. Create a podcast. But here's where we've grown. This is where we've grown in our missions. It needs to be sustainable. And it needs to be managed in a way that develops proper benchmarks so that we know to get rid of it when it fails. Because we're going to get it wrong somewhere. These are two things that are very important. Somebody, now I do this in my art class when I'm working with advanced and beginners. Somebody give me a subject. Your idea of a mission. Come on, help me out here. Don't leave me hanging. I'm one of your brothers. Somebody put up your hand and suggest something. Cindy will find you with the microphone. Go ahead, let's go. Let's go. Larry, come on. Hunger. Pardon? Hunger. How do we do it? Anybody. Hunger. If somebody is hungry, what do? This is not a difficult exercise. Break down the walls of what you think it is and give the obvious answer. If somebody is hungry, you feed them. I ain't got no food in my pantry. What do? Go to the store. I don't have any money to go to the store. What do? This might sound silly, but this is what stops. I mean, read the book. This is what stops missions. Looking at the easiest solutions for complex matters, because now we're at the store, but I asked the evil question. I said, I ain't got no money. Now what do? I go to a church and ask them for help. So many do. But here's what we're talking about: missions. Sustainability doesn't happen when you hand somebody a fish. You've resolved hunger. But when you hand them the fish and the fishing rod and the bait and say, over there, not over there. I believe Jesus says it even, right? Cast on that side of the boat. What do then? You empower. $18,000 wasn't our money. It was God's money. That's truly the point. It was God's money. We just made the connection happen. They didn't have the money to house people in a hotel room. That's what they needed help with. And the miracle of God brings us all together to do that. How am I doing, Rob? Yes? You look like you want to say something.
Yes, is this working? Ooh, it is. Ooh, I turned it on correctly. So can I add something?
Yes.
In here? So for me, I guess the question is, in the current situation, just get me on the camera a little bit. With the question we have in front of us, do we keep the building, keep things as is, or do we sell the building and continue to lease this space? How will that change our mission? Will it change it? We have a lot of things that go on in this facility right now. We have control over the facility, so we can kind of have some control over what happens here. If we hand the property over to someone else, the majority of the property, can we still keep some of the current missions going? Is one question that I ask myself all the time. And I don't have an answer to this. I just want to let you all know. Or the other side of that is, if we sell the building and we have this amount of money, however it might be, can we do something different, something more perhaps, if we're not perhaps tied down to the cost and the expense and the time that it takes to maintain a facility? Are there some benefits that we can gain by doing that to expand our mission or to do something different? And these are the questions that go through my mind right now, is how do we approach the idea of missions, thinking what we do right now versus what we might do in this scenario that we have in front of us. And again, I don't have answers, but I'm throwing it out here for you guys to think about, I guess, and to start, I guess, exploring that what if question that Larry puts in front of us. What if we sell the building? What does that mean with our current missions? And what does it mean with perhaps an additional amount of cash that we have now that we could leverage to perhaps do something more? And what does that mean, I guess? I'm not going to answer that question because I think about it myself.
Okay, I'm going to be, thank you. That's why I married her. She knows how to bring me back on track and get back to the quick of things. Here's the answer to the question. Who knows? Now, if we're going to go to the store and get groceries, who knows what that looks like? Because we haven't done it. You're right, Don. You brought up the questions of details. There's some details you have to have. Missions is wide open. There are needs, huge needs. There's a place for helping individuals in the transition from living at their homes to living at assisted living. There's a big gap in there in how do you advance to that. Other communities fill it. It's not filled here. We have assisted living. We don't have the other middle thing. So, there's that. But these questions are complex. And that's why it's so important to look at the question of what does God want us to do? To understand that we have a responsibility for others. That's important. What's new for missions? Oh, give me something. I'll go jump all over it. But it does have to come from us. It has to be an understanding of what the future brings and what we're willing to commit to it. You're very right. But, start thinking about that. It's really easy to say sky's the limit, but yeah, it pretty much is. It was for these folks. Now, I'm open to any questions. You will hear me say, I am a blue-collar manager. The latest, greatest thing coming down the pike is filled with hazards. It rarely works. And most times in business, private sector business, you return right back to where you started with one minor change or two. And you spent a lot of money to get there, and the counselors that you brought in to advise you, you don't dare disagree with them. You just spent $150,000 to $250,000 for these folks to come in and tell you how to do business. Last thing in the world you want to do is disagree with them. That would make you look foolish for buying them, wouldn't it? Hearing all sides of the matter is important.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Larry, on this. I appreciate the idea of laying out a mission from the perspective that you've come from today. I sort of assume that there's a mission of goodness and thinking about community and things that exists among the congregation already, and we can think all that through. The concern I have right now is I just don't think we're on the right topic, and I hate to say that, but the reason I'm a little concerned is that this is the third meeting we've had, and my sense that I got last week was the superintendent was going to come and we were going to make a decision on possibly selling the church. And I don't know what all that might involve. And I mentioned to some of you this past week that there's really 4 parties involved in any kind of agreement. It's the group across the street that's interested. It's whoever provides the financing for what they're wanting to do. It involves the district superintendent and the bishop and what the Methodist Church beyond us wants, and also what we want as a congregation. And I just keep trying to think, what is that we're trying to do, and are we ready to make a decision on it? And I think that over time, the whole mission thing would evolve, and we'd figure it out if we knew what kind of resources that we would have coming out of any kind of a sale, and how we might try to manage that to create good out there. And so I keep wanting to ask those of you that are on the board or on the committee, what is it exactly, the detail that we need to understand that we might be getting ourselves into, and how to resolve it?
Yes, that's a good.
I'd like to turn it to them.
Yeah.
My question is, I mean, it keeps coming back to me. This idea, this approach was last December, and I'm just trying to figure out why it took so long. That answer isn't going to be very helpful here right now, but it simply means that we've not really had time to think this through, and we don't have the information to make decisions.
So if I can, I'm going to put myself out a little bit on a limb here since I didn't speak directly with the district superintendent, but my understanding is that, is he coming next week? He's coming next week, okay. And so it's not, we're not going to make a decision to sell the church at that meeting. What it is a time. The decision is, do we want to continue to explore the possibility of selling the church with Palouse River Counseling? Do we want to, as a congregation, do we even want to consider this as an option, or do we want to just throw it out right now and say, no, we're cool with the way things are right now, essentially? So that's what the district superintendent, as I understand it, is looking for from us, is just to get a feel whether or not we even want to consider this. And then we will continue negotiations with Palouse River Counseling. And then at some point, if we settle on something, whoever's doing the negotiating, the details, if we come up with something that we think is reasonable, then it'll come back to the congregation again. And hopefully in between that time, we'll all have a chance to talk more and to come up with some more specifics. And the DS will be here to answer some of these questions that you bring up that I think are very good questions. So
one of the things that I would like to suggest is that you start getting things into writing as to exactly what it is that's going to be asked about. One of the things I worry about is just the hearsay of going back and forth from verbal conversations. And We went through the process of selling and buying a house in the last couple of years. It was really interesting, the number of pages that we ended up dealing with on going to all that. And I just began to think how much more the complex this is than simply buying or selling a house and the legal documents that might eventually be involved. And so I'm trying to figure out how we get enough of the specifics into the conversation that we can make an intelligent kind of decision. And even knowing what it is that the superintendent is going to be here. Has this person ever been in this church building? And I don't know who he is. But I wish he could get acquainted with the conversation and talk to us, and then, but also that we get in writing what's going to go on. And then the people that aren't here, when the superintendent shows up and then starts repeating that conversation and what it is that gets down of any kind of vote that's taken on anything. I've said this, and I said it in writing this last week to the board. I'm not opposed to this at all. I'm just trying to think through the details of any kind of, it's a business arrangement, and somehow that has to be worked through. And you don't make decisions just immediately.
You know, it also appears that between December and now, conversations have taken place. And so,
We don't know what they are.
but we don't, yeah, I mean, it's just like we've been thrown on the edges and we're still on the edge. So if this indeed has been discussed several times already, what issues have come up that we could articulate in a list so that now we say, okay, that's, you know, not an issue that it's going to really matter to us, and this one will further the mission, and here are ways we can do it. You know, Larry articulated many ways that we have and are doing missions out of this space, and we don't need the whole church in order to be able to do them. From my standpoint as financial secretary, you know, I'm very much aware of what's coming in, and I'm very much aware of the resources that we have. One of the mysteries to me, and I'm kind of jumping here, I guess, but I have had this in my mind for the last few days. One of the mysteries to me is that when we have a membership and participation report sent to the district superintendent each year, as we do, the first question on what is known as Table 1 is the total professing members reported at the close of last year, and it always compares with the year before. And the number is 94 in 2020 and 90 in 2021. And I'm trying to understand who those 90 people are. I do know there are roughly 65 individuals that are on our church directory. Many of those people we know intimately, and others less known. And we know of others that have been a part of this community, and they're not here now, but they're in the community, and they're not here, and you know why. Anyway, I don't understand how we can report that number, and I haven't asked enough questions, I guess. No one.
Does anyone else want to say something before I keep jabbing on?
You know, Larry, I can't get through one meeting without saying something. I appreciate the lack of transparency very much, and I certainly agree with that. I'm not going to answer what's all going on, but this is a very deep concern, and this is basically why we are bringing it to the congregation now, finally. Should have happened a long time ago, in my opinion. That's one thought. Secondly, call me the devil's advocate, if you will, but and I love missions. We have had all kinds of missions. But I question, that's all I've heard about from the sale of the building. Are there other options if we sell it, if we decide to? Why do we need to sell it to have these missions? Why? The only thing, the advantage that we see on the Finance Committee, Joy, Karen, and I have been working with our budget over the years that I've worked with our budget, is that 50% or more of our current budget goes to the upkeep of this building. And with our parking lot and some of the problems that we have in leaking roofs, the furnace system, which is terrible, we're going to have a lot more expense in the upkeep of this building. We need to evaluate those numbers. We need to bring this forward. We haven't done that yet. We talk about it. We talk about missions. Is that the only thing we need to talk about? I maintain that since 1980s, we've had the Iowa farm income, and a good portion of that was designed for missions. We sold that farm and gained $600 and some thousand. What the hell have we done with that for missions since then? Nothing. Very little. We've had that money sitting there, and now all of us, for missions, because that was the design for part of that money, and now we're all of a sudden talking about needing to do missions. We had the trip to Connell every year. We went up and helped in Spokane with the food. We've helped Families for Promise, yes, and we got involved in thinking about homelessness about 4 or 5 years ago. That dropped by the wayside. So what other options do we have, and do we really need to sell the building to accomplish that?
Don, I want to, excuse me, I want to answer your comment, because I think that it's fair to say that there are a lot of complexity, a lot of legal issues, leases, how those go together, how it goes together with the conference that need to be addressed if this were to go forward. And in fact, I was a little uncomfortable, and when people have mentioned, hey, things have happened since December, this is the first that Palouse River Counseling has come forward saying they've looked at a bunch of different options, okay? And they weren't sure, could a situation where we still could worship and have the ancillary sort of uses like Sunday school rooms and bathrooms and a reception work with their scheme. And so what I'll tell you is that as soon as, and before this it's been just conceptual, could this work? I still don't know if it will work. And I was a little bit uncomfortable having these meetings before we have anything more than just conceptual. But the DS has insisted, hey, we don't engage in negotiations behind a congregation's back, okay? We haven't engaged in any of that. We don't have the details, and so really, these conversations and the DS coming isn't to accept a deal. We don't have a deal. We probably won't for a while. There's a whole lot of issues. This is a very complex situation. There's, I think you've got it pegged exactly right. There's at least 4 entities, and we're doing this in a backdrop with a bunch of United Methodist Book of Discipline requirements and limitations. If we do this, what can we do with the money? And those are things that we need to get spelled out. What the building use will have to get will need to be spelled out. But I was uncomfortable having these meetings when the DS insisted on it, really, without those details. But I do think that an approach where before you go and try and figure out those details, you have open, candid conversations like we've had the last 3 weeks isn't a bad approach. What's the weakness? Well, you're standing in front of people saying, well, we don't have those details. But it's far better than saying, hey, Don, here's a contract, here's what we have, like it or not. Because really what we're looking for is, I think there's an upside for mission, there's an upside for financial issues. It has the potential in my mind to mean that Simpson continues as a congregation, which may or may not happen as our sizes diminish, as our EOGs diminish. And so the question is, we're not broke. At this point, what's interesting to me about this approach is it gives a potential for us to continue on as a congregation. It has the potential for putting us in a position where we can have a more invigorated mission, where we can do something instead of, and really we have two potential courses. One, the existing course, we try to balance our budget with the Iowa land and try and figure out how to make EOGs and other resources come together. Or we go with an option like this, and we won't be able to make a final decision until all of those issues are spelled out.
I appreciate a lot what you just said. This was kind of the way it would have been really nice to lay it out to us at the beginning of what was going on. I'm afraid that when it got started, it was cast very simplistically, and I'm afraid maybe our pastor simplified it a little bit in the way it was expressed, and I just thought, holy cow, this is crazy of trying to rush us through and all of a sudden saying we had to meet with the superintendent and make a decision to sell or not sell the building. And that just shouldn't have been done. But laying it out the way you are, I'm on board with that, and I'm very comfortable with it. And I also feel that something needs to be thought about our future and where we're going. But it needs to be done very thoughtfully. But thank you for coming.
I grew up in a congregational background. I married into the Methodist tradition, and so part of this is disconcerting to me because we don't have the details that I do think need to be explored, and working with a Methodist hierarchy is one of those elements that we've thought a lot about but don't have all the answers to.
I'd like to interject. Thank you for picking that stuff up, Don, and starting that up, because missions is tough. But I'm going to give you both sides of the issue because I believe ethically I'm required to. We don't have to sell this church. We don't have to rent this church. What Larry Hiller was alluding to is absolutely right. They didn't have to sell anything to do this, did they, Larry? But from a mission standpoint, that's where I stand. It's not where you stand. And those questions need to be answered. For me, from a business standpoint, I see a need. I want to do the job. Let's go. Let's do it. What are we waiting for? I don't care about the church sale. That's not what I care about. I care about the other side of the conversation. Why aren't we doing it already? We can do this thing. We have the professionals in place that know at least this much. But we do need those other questions answered. Don's absolutely right. We need a superintendent here. We need the details. Why? Because these are business questions. And quite frankly, Rob, you are also correct. Quite frankly, for 3 meetings now, the horse has been behind the cart, and we've been pulling the heavy load because when somebody asks a question, we don't have the answers. But I would like to ask that you keep that Christian faith when you come to the door. You have not stood up and judged us. I have not felt injured because I've been asked to talk. You have accepted me. You have not condemned me. You're not hanging me on the cross. Why didn't we get to it sooner? Well, we should have let somebody know right away. You know, hindsight's 20/20. We didn't get sooner, Joy, because scheduling. They came to us in December. Our chairman was booked solid for 2 months. We couldn't even sit. So, you know, that's just the process. It's just a process. Now, I hope I didn't offend you or make you feel like I put you on the spot. I didn't mean to. 12:15. We got to get out of here. Let's hear a closing prayer. Lord, thank you for your patience with us, and thank you for the grace that you brought down to this meeting, so that the folks had the patience to sit and mean to do your work. We ask for your forgiveness where we have failed, and we thank you graciously for where we have succeeded. May the children of God say amen and go in peace. Amen.